This is the Global Podcast Network, where executives and professionals connect, share, and inspire. Stay tuned for the conversations that drive success.
And welcome back, everybody. You've always heard this term, you got to plan for the future. Plan for the future. A lot of times that's connected to our finances. There's a lot of other things you can plan. How about this? Let's say you're involved with a nonprofit organization, and maybe you are the CEO. Maybe you're leading a team. Have you planned for the future, specifically succession, those who will succeed some of the key players in the organization? This is something in most organizations overlooked, but certainly in the nonprofit, it's a very specific niche. You need the right people in that position. We're going to talk about that today with somebody that coaches people all the time, but her niche is working with nonprofits. That's also her background for many, many decades, and that's why she's our professional of the year. Carey joins us on the program once again. How are you today?
I'm good. I'm real good.
So honestly, I never knew that this was a challenge for a lot of organizations in terms of planning who is going to be in a role next, because a lot of times the focus is just getting it by today or tomorrow, and especially in the nonprofit arena, making sure that donors are happy, that donations are up, and all of that. Do you feel that this is one of those things that succession planning often overlooked?
Oh, absolutely. And the thing of it is that board members and staff need to think about the sustainability of the organization long term. And in order to do that, you really have to look at the future.
When we talk about the future, what does that mean? How far out should we be thinking?
Well, I would say that probably 85% of the nonprofit sector do not have a succession plan. And if they do, it's very minimal. The time and energy you put into a succession plan really will tell you how successful it's going to be.
When it's the successors, those positions, how deep do you go? Obviously, upper management, you want to make sure you got that handled, but how many layers down should you be worried about?
Well, you have to look at the whole organization, and you pinpoint the key positions, and those would be your program managers, your administration, your executive director, your CFO, all those positions that if they weren't there and there wasn't a plan, could really cause turmoil and chaos for the organization and could, in fact, impact your mission and your ability to provide those kind of services that your mission requires you to do.
Have you been in a situation or know of situations where they got caught in a bad position, where somebody left, they got another job, and now what are we going to do?
It happens all the time, way too frequently. I've seen that happen. It's great if you're looking at a planned leave, which a lot of times executive directors or other positions, key positions, will give the nonprofit a heads up. This is my plan for the future. Okay. But there's other times when someone's just offered a new position, and, you don't have that time. Or there's a situation where someone becomes ill and is in a key role. So how do you manage that? What if your executive director or your CFO is in an auto accident and they're going to be out for months? How do you manage that? How do you pick up the pieces and continue to have everything go along, sort of in the flow, where there's no disruption of services, paychecks, or recruitment of volunteers or clients.
Do you feel, Karen, that there are times where those in these positions, or maybe a position above, whatever it might be, don't want to think about who might replace them because they don't want to fear for their job?
Oh, absolutely. I think that's part of the problem and the issue. But honestly, if you're a really good leader, you have to look past that and you have to focus on, okay, I'm not going to always be here. Maybe I'll have a great opportunity that will come up, or maybe I'll get sick and decide to retire early. So if you really focus on that mission, then you recognize as a really strong leader that you need to help the organization plan for that possibility.
When you've planned for it, and let's say you're in a certain role, let's say you're the CEO, right? You're in a nonprofit, been there for a while. It's all good. And let's say there's somebody in another position, and let's say you talk with the board and you're saying, we need to plan for the future. That person has what I believe is what we need to replace me. Or maybe it's somebody in the board saying, yeah, Jim, he's been here for 10 years now. If something were to change, he'd be the one that we want to elevate. Once you've identified that person, what comes next?
Well, you look at what's missing. What training are they going to need? And of course, is this a position that they would even want? Because some people, it sounds really wonderful to be asked to be in that kind of elevated position, but with it comes long hours, a lot of stress, a lot of opportunities that are not fun, that you have to make difficult decisions. I mean, it's not easy, and some people really don't want that in their life. So that's what you do, is you really, really make sure that this person is the right person, and see and evaluate them based on their current skills and what it would take. And one of the things you do is you invite them to start attending board meetings a little more frequently and present at board meetings. And this will give you an idea of how they present to the board and how the board reacts to them. And if you're really serious, you could also take them with you when you go and visit donors a few times, just for the experience and see how they come across. So you can do some pre-work before actually, having that conversation with them. Hey, listen, I may be leaving. It's not planned, but would you be interested if this happened? There's different areas that you would need to develop. Is this something you want to do or would consider doing? And I guess always making sure that they understand, especially if you're the CEO and this is the position you're looking at, that the board has the final decision. This doesn't mean that they're a shoo-in.
Right.
This just means that there's that potential.
And you never know what can come about, because let's say it wasn't to replace the CEO, maybe a couple of layers down. You might see from the management side skills or mentality you never realized in that person when you had them come to some meetings, when you had them present, maybe meet with some donors, whatever. It could be another position that opens up. Jim would be great for that position. Wow, I never knew. That was him.
Absolutely. And you can also find out from sort of doing that kind of like evaluation, if you would want to call it, that, this person, I was wrong. Maybe this person isn't the right person for the position. So you want to keep that open mind and look at that.
Yeah.
And I guess the other important thing is that the reason why succession planning is so important is because, it's hard to find good people to take over a nonprofit like that leadership position. It is not easy. In nonprofit work, salaries tend to be a lot lower than in the for-profit area.
Mm.
And with that comes a lot of challenges. You have to be really good at self-care. You have to be able to handle difficult situations. You have to be willing and able to work long hours, but also keep boundaries if you're going to be in it for the long haul.
What are some of the unique differences between a for-profit and a nonprofit when we're looking at the succession situation?
Well, first of all, in a for-profit business, you have a lot of extra funding there to do development, really formal development, like hiring a coach, perhaps, having a formal mentorship program, sending them to trainings. In a nonprofit sector organization, often that funding is not there. Now, you can go to your donors. Often those donors like to give funding to specific programs. And so that is challenging. But I would say this, is that if you have a donor who is really passionate about your mission, and you meet with them, a lot of times you can explain to them, listen, we're looking at the future of the organization. How do we stay sustainable for the long term? How are we able to continue making that mission impact in our community? And sometimes that donor will give you funding. But if you're going to do that, or if you're going to write a grant, you have to be very specific on how you're going to use that funding. Like with the donor, you're going to send this person to this training or that training, those kind of things. You're going to hire a coach. For-profit, they just have the money often. And that's why for-profits have a lot of challenges. Because the only way, if they are going to send someone to training, is hopefully there's a grant out there that will pay for it. But grants don't come on a time frame. I mean, they do, but it might be 6 months or a year down the road. So if you're looking at doing a succession plan that needs some dollars to help you, that may not work. So then you go to your board and really explain to them why succession plan is so critical, especially if you're looking at the executive director position, because the board, they hire that person. So it's advantageous for them to have a plan and sort of be guided in that process. So if there's fundraising dollars that they can allocate to help you with the training and the development of that individual, that's the best case scenario. If not, it's just, mentoring, cross-training. It's all of that, but really no formal training.
So now we've talked about succession and planning for it and alluded to promoting from within. Not always the case. So, all right, you're the CEO, nonprofit, planning for the future. How do you plan when there's nobody in the organization that you feel, and even the board and others, feel that might be the best choice to succeed you?
Well, I think that what's important long term, okay, this is not something that's going to happen overnight, but that moving forward, when you look at hiring people, you have that in mind. So when you're looking at hiring, whether it's a CFO or a program director, you're looking for someone who has those leadership abilities that might be the right person for that position. And the other thing that is really important is that, if you have the funding, and this is why it's sort of long-term, you look at creating a position, especially if you're a large nonprofit, that would replace the executive director, like a deputy director, so that you can actually hire from within, or go out in the community and find someone who could be developed in a way to take over the position of the executive director. But that takes additional funding. That's a whole new position. But it's still, a valuable opportunity for nonprofits to really consider. The other thing that's really important is that's a long-term plan, and by the way, you document all this.
I was just getting to that.
With time frames,
yes.
the development needs, all that. But the thing of it is, that's long term. You need to have an emergency succession plan. And it may not be perfect, especially if you have an organization where there's absolutely no one to take that position. You still need to have one. So you figure out, okay, what do I have with the leadership of the board and with the staff that we have, that if I, Karen, got run over by a bus tomorrow and was going to be out for the next 3 months, how would we move forward? Who on the board could maybe fill in and help some of those positions? So, if it's the CFO, who on the board, perhaps, if there's no one in the organization, and often there's not, who physically could take over the position of, finance, who maybe the board treasurer could, in the short term, do that. Who would let the community know that there's been a disruption in our leadership, but we're continuing to provide services to the community. And these are the contacts of the people to contact. These are the individuals to contact if there's questions or concerns. So that is really key.
Assuming that you're not going to find somebody within, should you, all the key positions, should there be created a manifest, or call it a blueprint? Maybe the short term, this is the emergency situation right over here. Break glass, here it is. Or the long term, and have that documented and ready to go in the event of, let's say, gosh forbid, something happens to somebody, a key player, that you have a plan. This is it. This is what we talked about. These are the things you need to look for immediately. Then the long term, now we look, ads go out, Career Builder, Indeed, whatever it might be.
Oh, absolutely. With no doubt. And it's really important that the board is involved in some of this. Now, maybe not initially, letting the board know what you're doing, but maybe not going into great detail until you sort of have a roadmap, so to speak. But then, they need to be involved. They need to sign off on it, so to speak. This makes sense. The executive director is one person. You have a board who have lots of experience and talents and may think of something that the executive director did not think of. So, make sure that the board, that you're a team with the board, And I think the other thing that's really critical about succession planning, because it's not just replacing people, it's also making sure that the organization is in a place that whoever takes over, no matter if it's the executive director or a program director, that all the policies and procedures are totally up to date. So that someone coming in, whether it's a temporary person or sort of the person who you just hired, has a roadmap that they can follow, so they're not in the dark. And the other key thing that's really important, where the board needs to sign off on, is job descriptions, keeping those job descriptions up to date. Now, if you're looking at making some changes in how the organization looks, whether it's the executive director's position or the fundraising development person, then you need to make sure that those job descriptions are accurate and relate to those changes so that the board is ready to go. Or as the executive director, you're ready to go if something happens. You don't have to go back to the drawing board and go, oh my gosh, you know, they've been doing A, B, and C, but guess what? They're now doing something else that's not in their job description. You know, so really that's key. And continuing to assess that plan, the long-term plan, as well as the emergency plan, because people come and people go. So those things can change.
I see this in a different light now. I have to tell you, it's almost, with the succession planning, it's almost a reason to do a little tidying up. You know, things we haven't looked at, these certain things, job descriptions and such. And by the way, I think I've shared with you before that I'm on the board of a nonprofit.
Right.
And at the last meeting, which was exactly a week ago, the board chair announced, and this is basically the right-hand person of the CEO, that she is stepping down. It's been 10 years. It's, you know, she would like to continue. Just too much going on in her life and responsibilities personally, professionally, and such. And the announcement was made basically, if anybody in the room is interested, but that's the starting point there.
Oh, absolutely. And I would say when you're talking about succession, you're also talking about those key roles of the board. Because it's really, really important to have the right board chair. Take it from an executive director. If you have the wrong person in that position, then it's going to make life difficult, not only for the board, possibly the board, but also for the executive director. So when you look at having, if you are lucky, because not all boards have a vice president, but that position is supposed to be a position that is going to take over as the board president.
Yeah.
A lot of times what happens is they take it saying, I'll be the vice president, but I'm not going to be the chair.
Everything you're saying is so spot on. And in this organization, it's call it a chapter of many around the country. We are financially sound. Membership is up. Donations are up. It's all looking good. But that board chair, I don't know how we're going to replace her. She is so passionate, invested, plugged in, and her and the CEO, they just run in sync, and they, you know, it's almost like, you know, a tag team, you know, wrestlers. They just know how it all works. Yeah.
And that makes it really hard and difficult for the other people on the board because they're feeling like, I couldn't possibly do as good a job as you do. And part of sort of what happens, and I think, is that boards don't have term limits for their officers or for being on the board. So often what happens is either one of two things. Like the example you're giving, someone becomes excellent. They probably weren't great initially because they didn't, they were trying to figure it out. But by 10 years, they've got it dialed and they know exactly what they're doing.
Oh, yeah.
You have that scenario, but that causes this like, oh my gosh, for the other board, I can't do what she does. I don't have the time she does.
Nope.
Or you have the other scenario, which is they just, they start out initially being really passionate, but as time went on, they do a little less and a little less, so you have those scenarios. So it's really, really important for the board to have those job descriptions also.
So
for
true.
the officers and for the rest of the board, because when she leaves, hopefully she has a job description. She can say, okay, guys, here's my job description, just to remind you, I do all these extra things that are not on the job description. That doesn't mean you, if you take my position, have to do that necessarily. Sure. I chose to do it. Maybe my situation is such that I have the extra time. But that's really helpful to have those job descriptions because people are just like overwhelmed and like, oh my gosh, I can't do it. I have all these other things going on in my life,
It's so true, Karen.
So,
even looking at
success planning is important.
Oh my gosh, it is. And I'm on a board and I didn't even think of that until we started talking. and there's many thoughts and emotions that come into play. And you bring a great one up too, as we close it out here today, in that she'd been there 10 years. In the beginning, let's be honest, she probably was good, but she wasn't even nearly as good as she is now. But we look at her now thinking, there's no way I can do that. There's no way Fortunately, I believe she said that she would still be on the board in some capacity. So it's not like she's just exiting. She will be there to help that next person. But succession planning, so important. This is all a part of what you help people with nonprofits and not. ThriveCoachingandConsulting.com is your website, right?
Yes, it is.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for all of these shows, all of the insight. And you work with anybody. Doesn't have to be on a nonprofit level, doesn't have to be on a succession planning situation. This is just a piece of what you offer. But if anybody's looking to level up and move their career and life forward, or even their nonprofit, ThriveCoachingandConsulting.com. Thank you so much for today and these podcasts.
Okay. Thank you, Steve. It's been fun.
It really has. And I truly appreciate it. And I got lots to think about and bring back to the board after.
Yeah. And if you have a question, call me. You've got my number.
I appreciate that. All right. We'll catch up soon. We'll be right back.
Take care.
This is the Global Podcast Network, where executives and professionals connect, share, and inspire. Stay tuned for the conversations that drive success.
Hi, this is Terry Crews, actor, former football player, game show host, father of 5, and all-around big dude. I'm also an expert on drama. I know all kinds of drama. There's the good kind that comes with having a house full of kids. There's the bad kind like season-ending injuries. There's the necessary kind like having an agent in Hollywood. And there's silly drama like the drama around my percolating pectorals. And then there's the drama you can skip.
Skip the drama that comes with not having your high school diploma or equivalency. Find free adult education classes near you and finish your high school diploma. Visit finishyourdiploma.org.
Or text diploma to 97779. Message and data rates may apply. Reply STOP to opt out. That's diploma to 97779. And leave the drama to actors like me.
Brought to you by the Dollar General Literacy Foundation and the Ad Council.